Welcome to the Systems Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the Systems Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow, and thrive. And today's guest is Corey Kupfer. Hi, Corey.
Hi, Adi.
How are you?
I am great. I'm excited to be with you and your audience.
Thank you. And we have an exciting conversation today about deals, negotiation. Of course, we're going to talk about systems and how it applies to it. So, but first of all, let me introduce you, get your whole bio. So, Corey, you're an expert strategist. You are a negotiator and deal maker with more than 35 years of professional deal making and negotiating experience as a successful entrepreneur, attorney, consultant, author, and professional speaker. And I can tell the audience, I mean, I heard you, we are both part of an entrepreneur organization, and I heard you speak at Deals Exchange, and you are a great speaker. Very engaging, very, you just have to listen to you because you talk to the point and you give specific advice that is very valuable. So definitely that bio is correct. I can attest to it.
Thank you.
So you're the founder and principal of Kupfer and Associates, and you're a leading corporate and deal law firm. And let's see, what else? You're the founder and CEO of DealQuest, a speaking, training, and consulting company, and the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Authentic Negotiating, Clarity, Detachment, and Equilibrium, the 3 keys to true negotiating success and how to achieve them. You are also the creator and host of the top 1% ranked DealQuest podcast. You originally joined EO, Entrepreneur Organization New York, in 2008. You were a president, and you're currently member of the EO Los Angeles, meaning you moved to Los Angeles, and East Breeze chapter, and you are the champion for my EO Deals Exchange. So now none of our listeners are familiar with EO, but basically EO, again, is Entrepreneur Organization. So those are different leadership roles within that organization.
Correct.
Okay, so definitely quite an accomplished bio. So very good. And here's my first question. So, you closed many, many deals throughout your career. What are the key systems or processes that you rely on to ensure that flow, that the deal flow is consistent and scalable?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. I can think of 2 aspects to that, right? One is, I think you're asking me maybe in terms of me getting deal flow in, but then there are also systems in terms of actually getting a deal, right, closed.
Well, that's what I'm talking. Yeah, the deal is closed because, obviously, if you're doing a lot of deals, you have to make sure you have a system there in order to get the deals. Closed.
So let's start out. The first thing is on the level of due diligence, right? So we have systems in place. We have questionnaires. We have lists of due diligence on the things that we have to look at, whether it's on the buy side or the sell side. And in fact, it's interesting because we don't have this yet, but we're developing an offering and a product. Here's the thing that happens. Let me tell you what happens when people come to a deal. Let's say they're going to sell their company, right? And now they get this extensive due diligence request from the buyer, and they're scrambling, right? Because unless they're a very big company that's become very systemized, I'm talking about in the smaller to medium-sized deal market, under $50 million, let's say, or even sometimes under $100 million. You're talking about companies that may be very, very successful, but maybe they've systemized their sales process, or they systemize but in terms of sort of their record keeping and due diligence and legal stuff, and maybe even their finances or whatever, they're not. So now they're scrambling to get stuff together, to find copies of contracts, to respond to this due diligence request. And there's this saying that time kills all deals, right? So there's a rhythm and a pace to a deal. So when you slow it down like that, or when you don't have something that's locked up, a lot of times the buyers start to question, oh, how, do these folks have their act together? What else don't we know? So we're actually working on something that's going to have what you have in an M&A deal is a data room where you're uploading all the data. Well, why not create a data room and a structure, which is what we're working on now for clients to do that from day one, where this is where they store their stuff. It helps them from an ongoing operations point of view. They could always find their client contracts. They always find their statement of incorporation, their amendments, the shareholders agreement, or whatever it is. And then that will prepare them to do a deal later on. So that's one system. It's just really making sure that all of your documentation, all of your key documents that, and by the way, this is not just M&A, a lender is going to want to see some of that stuff. An
Look, it's
investor.
brilliant because every time, like, you go, even personal life, you go through, okay, now I have to apply for another mortgage or another loan. I always tell myself, oh, okay, well, I wish, I mean, I do have it, but I can see that. That's why I start doing it, because the last time, I mean, a few years ago when we refinanced something, an asset, then I go, okay, from now on, when they ask me for it, it's all going to be organized. And it actually happened. And within minutes, I could provide everything, because that is the key. It's like you systematize it, because you prepare for the future, because otherwise you're just scrambling.
That's right. And listen, even if you never do a deal, it is a best practice just in terms of operations. It makes it easy to find things and whatever, right? So a lot of things you do to prepare to do deals are best practices anyway, right? Making sure your financials are in shape. Even classic, we talk about this in Entrepreneurs Organization, which is, having a company that runs without you, building a management team. Well, that happens, that's less on the systemizing thing, although obviously the more team you have, the more system, right? But that's the classic thing where it puts you in such a better position to sell your company. But if you never sell it, you're better off, you're better off anyway. So yeah, so we start out with due diligence. Then obviously we have all kinds of checklists that we do in terms of, what we're looking for in various legal documents, like let's say an asset purchase agreement, right? Are the right representations in there? What do the indemnities say? I won't get into, down the legal rabbit hole, but we have checklists in that. And in fact, as the firm has grown, and obviously we have associates now, it's become part of our, so the checklist and systems we have that benefit us as to the client work also become materials that we can now internally train people on, right? Because if we have a younger associate and we have a due diligence checklist, or we have a questionnaire that we provide our clients for their shareholders or operating agreements, right, which makes it easier to get data, it's also a system the way you can train people internally now, right? Because, oh, this is the way we do it with clients. Why do we do that? Why is that question important? So you can have them, you can use those same documentations and systems for internal training as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Corey, what got you, what interested you? How did you get into deals, basically?
Yeah.
Okay, so you went to law school, and did you know then that you were going to go to law school in order to make deals?
No. So this is what's really interesting. First of all, on the one hand, I was in this special law, politics, and community affairs program at Tilden High in Brooklyn. So I actually am unusual in that I went into college knowing I wanted to be a lawyer, although of course in hindsight I didn't really know what that meant. I just knew what I had, we were doing like mock trials and presidential elections and visiting prisons, nothing to do with what I do now. But it put this thing in my mind that I want to be a lawyer. And I went through college that way. I think most people who go to law school are actually, it's much the opposite. They do well in college and then they're like, okay, what's next? MBA, law school, and they end up there. But when I graduated law school, I thought I wanted to be a management side labor law attorney. I had worked in-house during school at a summer, and then over my third year at General Foods in their in-house legal department on the employment side, and I thought that was what I wanted to do. And I won't tell the whole story, but the short version is within a year of starting out at the big firm I started at, because they had both brought in a new partner running the labor department who was one of the most miserable human beings on earth and changed the entire culture for the bad on that side. And between the fact that it was 1985 going into 1986, which was a tax law change in the US, which spurred a lot of deals going on. So they needed help over there. And they asked me to help out, and I was unhappy on this side. I sort of fell into it, but I loved it. I remember when I was still a law student working over the summer, I worked on this leverage buyout. It was the Dot Drug. It was a big drugstore franchise in the Southeast. And I don't know, I was fascinated by the negotiating. In my authentic negotiating book, I tell a story about the partner there who, we're working around the clock, and it's the night before the deal's supposed to close. And this issue came up. Again, I won't get into the details of it, but it looked like the deal was dead. I mean, the parties walked out, right, at 11 o'clock at night. I thought the deal's dead. Everybody's got sad faces on. The management team who was trying to buy it out is like some of them are crying because they leveraged everything they had. I mean, it was very dramatic. And through all that drama, as we were walking out of the room, the senior partner on the deal, remember, I'm a law student, so I'm, proofreading stuff and making copies of, right? He turns to me, sort of like I had this worried look on my face. He turns to me and says, "Don't worry about it, kid. This deal's going to close." And I remember thinking to myself, how does he know that? Everybody else in the room assumes this deal is dead, right? People are crying, people are walking out. And somehow he knew that it was going to get closed, even though we had this issue that seemed to be. And that fascinated me. I was like, okay, what is that to understand, to see the fields? And by the way, it did close that next day. He had pulled people together. He had calls at 1 and 2 in the morning. People got back at 6 a.m. and the deal got closed. He was right. And that, I think, was one of the biggest things that triggered me, is like, I need to figure out how he did that. That's fascinating to me, that he could orchestrate. He knew he could see the field when everybody else was panicking.
So what did you figure out? How did you figure out?
Well, it's interesting because it's the core of my negotiating book. It's funny. I was writing the book, right? I wrote the book for over a year. My dad had passed away, so I took some time off and I came back to it. And I remember I read the draft that I had with a co-writer that helped me with it. And I'm like, it's good, but there's something missing. There's something missing. And what I realized was that there was a fundamental underlying framework that I hadn't specifically articulated. That you ever have this, you've heard this concept probably of unconscious competent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's really, and that's, by the way, how Fred, the senior partner, was. Like, he was never a guy who explained himself to anybody, right? You just had to watch him. And he probably couldn't have explained how he did it because he was an unconscious competent. You have mastery in something, but you can't really break it down, which means you can't train it.
I mean, that's
And
what we do all the time in knowledge transfer. Like when you come and do a knowledge transfer of the head of the company, you usually say, well, I don't know how I do it. Okay, good. So that's our job to actually extract it out. So yeah, I completely understand what you talk about.
That's right. And I sort of had to extract it out for myself, because between sort of studying him and studying other people and reading stuff and just having day-to-day years of negotiating experience, it was only until I wrote the book and realized something was missing that I realized that there was a fundamental underlying framework that I had always worked with but hadn't distinguished, that really also finally decades later explained to me what this senior partner had. And that's where clarity, detachment, and equilibrium came from, right? Most of the trainings and books and things on negotiating out there, I mean, I'm not saying there aren't some of the good ones out there, but a lot of them are on, well, either they're manipulative and inauthentic, right? Which, I don't subscribe to at all. Or even if they're not, even if they're positive, they're more on the strategic and tactical level, right? Oh, if they say this, you do this, or here's how you mirror, or here's how you can read somebody's, facial expressions, right? And I'm not saying there's not value in that stuff, but fundamentally, what I realized from this senior partner was that, okay, what did it take him to stay calm in the storm, right? And how did he have such clarity? So the first piece is clarity. And many of us don't spend the time. People are in multi-million-dollar negotiations, and they don't spend the time to get the clarity that they need. And clarity is two pieces. One is the external research. What's the market? What are the other, what's the other side looking for? What's the valuation? Whatever it is. But the bigger piece, and listen, this is a fundamental human issue, is the internal clarity, right?
That's right.
What is it that is really important to me? What is it that I want? What's truly non-negotiable, not out of ego or upset, but just out of like, what are my objectives? What I want? What will work for me? What won't work for me? And there's a whole internal body of work that you need to do. And the master negotiators that I've studied, starting out with this senior partner, are always have an unbelievable level of clarity, which is why they don't get thrown off, right? They understand what they want, they don't want, and they're willing to walk away from a deal. And this is the key point, because a lot of people talk about walking away, But most people who walk away from a deal walk away from anger, upset, ego, or some other, reaction. The master negotiators walk away from a deal from a place of clarity. It's
That's
not
exactly
that.
right, because it doesn't align. You're absolutely right. It
That's right.
doesn't
It
align
doesn't
to what
align.
it doesn't align. So then you have your rule and you can go, okay, do I want it or do I not? I don't want it according to your rules. And it shows. It shows in the equilibrium, right? Because then you can have like your own internal equilibrium, right? It is.
That's exactly right, Adi.
Yeah.
You're so on it, and it's almost like, it's funny because you talk about systems, right? And one of the things I did it was many years ago, and I don't even remember. I always hate that I can't credit these two guys because I don't, like, it was 20 years ago, and I don't remember who they are. But this whole unconscious competence, the system thing, they basically said that most people who are great at something actually do have a system on the way they do it. They're just not aware that the system's there.
Absolutely. That's why I say, my example is like you wake up in the morning and you make your coffee or tea or whatever. You have a system. Nobody can tell me that they're doing something different every single day, right?
That's
You
right.
have your system, you do it. So there is a process. There is no process, but what is the process and identifying it? And that's what you did with your book, is you identified that. And you're right. The majority of what's out there in terms of negotiating is the tactics or the manipulation, as opposed to being authentic. Because if you have the clarity, you have the equilibrium, you're also coming across as authentic because you're yourself, because you are very much know for yourself what you want. And that's what authenticity is. It's like you become yourself and not somebody else.
100%. So, right. So if you have that clarity, and then the D is detachment, right? And that's the ability. The best negotiators have a preference. If I'm negotiating a deal with Adi, should have a preference. I get it done, or else why am I wasting my time? But the best negotiators are equally fine. Like, either I get the deal done with Adi or I don't. Either's okay, right? Obviously, because if it meets my objectives, I do it. If it doesn't meet my objectives, I don't do it. Doesn't mean, and this is the key thing, like, not saying it's not anger, upset. Like, if I walk away from that deal because it doesn't meet my objectives, it doesn't mean that, Adi's a jerk or she's this or that, like all this judgment people have about people on the other side. It just means Adi's objectives today didn't meet my objectives today. There's no hard feelings. Maybe we'll do a deal in the future. Maybe we'll do something else. Maybe we're not meant to do a deal, right? The best negotiators have that detachment. And then, yes, when they get into negotiation, they maintain that equilibrium. They don't get thrown off. They don't get triggered by upset, anger, ego, fear, scarcity, all of these internal. So, I think one of the things that's at least talked about in life and in negotiations is this internal body of work that we need to do. Listen, as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, I think any of us who have any self-awareness understand that the biggest limitations that there are the ones that we are either put on ourselves or not distinguished within ourselves, right? And the internal body, our success level, if we live in some sort of fear of scarcity, or have some relationship to money where we have a limit that's unidentified, whatever, I don't care what we learn in terms of external skills, we're going to sabotage and not do well unless we do that internal body of work. And then it's amazing because when you do, you find out that there are systems that you can identify.
That is so true. When people ask me, okay, how do I implement systems? How do I make sure that my systems are being implemented or the process is implemented? Just like what you said, it's mindset first. What is your mindset concerning systems? Do you want clarity? Do you want accountability? Why do you want to implement it? It's just like what you said. It's exactly right. If you don't start with that, then the rest, the tactics are just the tactics, and they will not follow unless you have that mindset. But Corey, when I talk to you, when I see you, now we are part of, you lead the Deals Exchange, and I'm an ambassador for it because I really believe in it. I think it's a great event, and it's a great group, not just the event, just the people that are involved in it. I always notice that what I noticed for myself, maybe you tell me, no, it is not correct, but you are so passionate about it, and you act it like it's a game. It was kind of like this game. It's like this amazing soccer game or football game, and you are in it, and you're doing the deals, and you are helping people, and you're always like that. So is that true? Is that how you see things?
It really is. Listen, there's so many lawyers who don't love what they do, and so many people who don't love what they do. I'm blessed to, I'm in my purpose, I'm in my passion in business. I love helping people grow their business. I love having people monetize and exit. I love people coming together and figure out how they can support each other. And, you know, for me, it always goes down to, it's not like, oh, great, I helped some company scale to 100 million, whatever it is like that. That's not, it's the relationships with the people. It's right. It's why I love working with entrepreneurial and growing companies. You know, we don't represent a lot of Fortune 500 companies. It's not, they use bigger firms, and that's fine with me, because I'd rather represent the privately held, you know, small, I mean, we don't do tiny companies, but, you know, like, you know, low middle market up to upper middle market companies, you know. And if you're running a company that's doing a couple of million up to $100 million, you know, all of the success of that business is tied into your lifestyle, where, you know, what you can do with your family, where your kids go to college, how you create jobs and support, you know, other people to grow and learn and whatever. And I always, you know, keep that in mind. And, you know, it's most satisfying. We had, there's a phenomenal situation. We had somebody, so one of the areas we do a lot of work in, we have clients all over the country and all over the, you know, cross industries, but we do a lot in financial services with wealth management. We've gotten known in that space. It's one of the niches. There was a guy who we helped start his company 25 years ago, right? He had left US Trust. He had started his own independent investment advisory firm. We helped him leave. We helped him get set up. And then 2 years ago, so 23 years later, he had built up the company, and then he exited it. I mean, he's a partner now, where he merged in for a period of time at, you know, very, very significant, you know, tens of millions of dollars. And again, it's not about that number. For me, it's about how blessed am I to have a 23-year relationship with a client where I help support them go from startup to exit, right? And that's, for us, the ideal. Like, you know, we can help you from the start, and we can help you all along your journey. And so I'm passionate about the clients. I love deals, like just that mindset of figuring out another way to grow, another way to achieve your objectives. That kind of strategy part of it, you know, is fascinating to me. So yeah, you're right. I'm passionate about what I do.
And it's great, and it shows. So Corey, if people want to get a hold of you right now, we have entrepreneurs that are listening to you. They want to get a hold of you because, you know, they have to start now. You know, don't wait until you want to sell. You know, they have to start now, because you also consult them and you set everything right. How do they get a hold of you?
So the law firm website is kupferlaw.com, KUPFERLAW.com. CoreyKupfer.com, CoreyKupfer.com is my general website. So that's got more about my speaking, the podcast, the book, and it'll also link you back to the website. So, and I put a lot of content, mainly on LinkedIn, so people can also find me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. So yeah, I encourage our listeners to go to those websites and get the book and really get the mindset right, because negotiation, everything in life is negotiation, really. I mean, everything is a deal, right? I mean, where are we going to go to dinner tonight is a deal. Everything is a deal.
Exactly.
So definitely I will include it in the show notes. And thank you, Corey, for being a guest on this podcast. It's been a fascinating conversation, and I'm sure our listeners learned a lot, and they're going to reach out to learn some more.
Adi, thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Systems Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.